Hello, everyone. Welcome to VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, broadcasting today with David Heaney in London. The date is June 4th, 2024, and we're live on YouTube via OBS from David Heaney's UVR studios. David, what do we have today?
Yeah, we have a lot of news today. I mean, it's been a huge day, even just today in VR news. Over the past entire week, there's been a lot. This is going to be a big show, and apologies for being late. We did have a lot of news to get to, and then some technical issues coming into joining. So we're first going to talk about that V66 update that was just announced. The Quest V66 update, which significantly reduces the pass-through distortion of Quest 3, which is what we described as one of the biggest issues with the headset in our review, if not the biggest issue. So that's a groundbreaking update coming to Quest 3. We'll then talk about, briefly, Quest's web browser getting Netflix support. We'll talk about HTC offering a free Deluxe pack to all Vive XR Elite owners with upgraded ergonomics, 4 free accessories. It's a really interesting strategy there from HTC. We'll talk about Spacetop G1, the consumer release of the laptop that has AR glasses instead of a screen. So docked wired AR glasses instead of a screen. We'll talk about Immersed saying that it will publicly demo its Visor in September. So a lot of controversy there about Immersed and Visor, but they're saying they're going to put it on heads in September and prove the world wrong. We'll have to see. We'll then talk about a public benchmark seemingly showing Pico 4S will use the same chipset as Quest 3 with more RAM. We'll talk about the Horizon Workrooms update, which streamlines the interface and improves the personal office but removes key features. We'll talk about the completely out of left field news that Magic Leap and Google announced an AR partnership. Magic Leap and Google joining together. We'll talk about Palmer Luckey's announcement of an announcement. He said he's going to announce that he's announcing a headset. He announced that he's going to announce a headset. We'll then talk about Quest 3S being listed on the official Quest store. Quest 3S is essentially effectively confirmed that is Meta's next headset. We think we know quite a lot about it already, and we think we know where it will slot in Meta's lineup. Finally, we'll talk about PlayStation VR2. Sony officially announced the adapter for PC VR usage, and they put the headset on sale for $100 off for the next 2 weeks or so. So a huge number of topics there. We're going to have to really try hard to keep it focused and get through these because that's 11 topics.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Let's get right to it. How much we've got. I wanted to make I was catching up on all the commentary while you were going through the list. You just spent, 2 minutes there just going through the list of stuff we've got. And then I'm going back and looking at Anti-Cleric, talking about our lateness, right? And the difficulty of us coming in on stream with a live show in VR with software updates at the platform level combined with software updates at the app level combined with networking bugs that can hit us in 2 different continents at any given day. It's a lot for us to get through. One thing I was thinking about is that I see in the comments suggesting I do like this waiting area as communication. There's a nice little area where people talk about interesting things while we're waiting. It'd be cool if we could show something on the TV if we're ever late. And of course, we are trying our absolute best to start on time, even though it's kind of difficult.
Yeah, I think as we've said before, the main problem is mainly that we're working on writing, and so that's our primary job. There's a huge amount of news, and sometimes we can't jump in. It's not really, some of those issues you mentioned there really aren't what make us late. It's just that we're working on writing. But let's get straight in and talk about that first piece of news. As you said, the Quest V66 update. One of the comments we have here immediately from Cooper Al saying V66 update. Sorry, it's not the right comment there. It's scrolled past. It's from Black Market Honey. I already have V66. No real improvement in pass-through, in my opinion. So one thing that's very important to note before we even talk about this is that, firstly, if you have the public test channel of V66, you don't have V66. You have a early release of V66 that doesn't have all of the features. Secondly, even if you do have the public V66, which no one has yet because Meta rolls out these updates gradually over 2 weeks, you don't get the pass-through feature automatically. What Meta sometimes does with certain updates is rolls out sub-updates within them. So you get V66 and pass-through is going to be one where even getting the update doesn't mean you have the improvement because they then roll it out separately. So there's 2 levels of rollout happening here. V66 itself and then the pass-through improvement in V66, which you will get over time gradually. So if you don't see any improvement, the answer is you don't have it yet, is the answer there. But let's actually talk about what this is. In case anyone hasn't seen, if you go to uploadvr.com right now and click on that giant central article, or if you're on mobile, the very top article, you'll see a video that shows a comparison of V65 and V66 pass-through. And what V66 does is it significantly reduces the distortion that you see. If you don't have a Quest 3 and you don't know what we're talking about, essentially when you're using pass-through in Quest 3, you'll notice that as you move your arm across, there's this massive distortion on everything behind. And anytime there's an object that's moving in anywhere in the scene, or you walk around, you'll see this warping distortion. And the cause of that is that Quest 3's pass-through is depth correct, or at least it tries its best to be depth correct. So what it does is it does a depth estimation of the entire visual field of what you're seeing, and then reprojects the pixels from the cameras to match where they should be seen from your eye. Because on any headset, the camera positions are not going to be exactly where your eyes are. Firstly, your eyes have a certain distance between them, and it's going to be very different between different people, your interpupillary distance. And a headset's cameras are fixed. Secondly, they're not directly aligned with where your eyes are anyway, even vertically. But the biggest issue is the depth, right? They are, because of that lens and display and plastic and chip, there is a massive difference in where the camera is and where your eyes are. And so as you rotate your head, it's the actual axis upon which the camera is rotating is very, very different. So if they were to just show you a pure camera view, as some older headsets did, you would get sick in seconds, right? An example of a headset that does this very badly, that essentially just shows you the cameras, is the Vive XR Elite, which we'll talk about soon. And I can't be in that thing's pass-through for more than 30 seconds without feeling sick. So Quest is, to my knowledge, the only headset with pass-through cameras that tries everything to be depth correct and doesn't trade off depth correctness for other things. And the cost of that is that because the depth estimation field is a lot lower resolution than the cameras, right? There's 4 million pixels of color for each eye, but the depth field is probably a lot less, right? It's in the order of hundreds of thousands of pixels. So the way that they are having to match those color pixels to the right depth is in giant chunks, and that's where you get that warping. So, when you put out your hand, instead of having like a perfect depth estimate of all of your hands and fingers compared to the background, it's a big blob of where your hand is. And that's why it hasn't been, that's why you have seen that significant distortion. We don't know what they've done to improve it. We'll have to test it. We'll have to find out. We'll have to hope that they put a technical blog post out. We just don't know. Possibly they find a way to increase the depth estimation resolution and accuracy without increasing compute. That sounds unlikely, but maybe they figured out a way.
So I've been looking at the comments here, trying to catch up on everything, trying to see what we should respond to. And I saw right at the top of the conversation, people asking about compatibility of their Quest library going forward. That's a late in our show discussion. Short answer is it should be compatible across the board. Long answer, we can get to it then. But I'm seeing Steve's question here. Had a question for folks. Does it make sense for Apple to call the cheaper Apple Vision Pro Air when a new headset will still likely be heavier than the lightest headsets out there? Thought that was an interesting one for us to think about as we move on. I'm seeing people really debate the pass-through quality. Like how do you qualify it improving in so many respects relative to what you see when you put on the Apple Vision Pro?
Yeah, I think if we look at just the comparison video you can see on uploadvr.com, if the distortion really is improved to that degree, then that takes away the biggest issue with Quest's pass-through compared to Vision Pro, which we discussed in our review of Vision Pro. Now, Vision Pro still has the advantage of having higher resolution. It's 6.5 megapixels instead of 4 megapixels per eye for its pass-through cameras. It still has the advantage of being lower latency. One of the greatest things about Vision Pro's pass-through is that latency feels just very, very, very low. But if you consider the price difference between these headsets, $500 versus $3,500, that's a 7 times price difference. And with this update, it looks like Quest 3 is getting, say, 2/3 as good pass-through quality for 1/7 the price. And that's really the trend we're going to see here. It is remarkable what Meta has been able to do with software updates. In fact, we've said on this show before that we didn't expect this update to happen based on the fact that we understand how this works, and B, the fact that Meta's CTO, Andrew Bosworth, downplayed the possibility of this happening when Quest 3 launched. He said, we're going to see some minor improvements to pass through. There's going to be a little few fixes here and there, but don't expect this to dramatically change. And that's really been a case of under promise and over deliver here. Like if you look at the comparison here, this is a dramatic difference. This is the single most significant Quest 3 update yet.
So this comment from Clayman, a regular viewer of ours, and they gave us some history on their name in the comments there that I can't remember right now, but it was interesting. They just found out the word Clay meant something different. But they said, I thought AVP did it through an entire processor dedicated to just tracking. That's really interesting. The two platforms here are really hard to compare when you're talking about some things done on the R1 processor on the Apple Vision Pro and some things actually done on the headset itself. We actually don't really see what a Vision Pro looks like without pass-through running very often, right? It's always paired up in a really different way than we see out of the Quest system. And that makes it hard for us to talk about some of the underlying layers in a really cohesive way for our audience. Like we can talk about it and you're really technical in your language, but it's still going to be hard for you as our viewers to understand how much tracking is handled by which processor, and then how that relates to the fact that the stuff has to be reprojected for your eyes in different ways.
Yeah, so Vision Pro achieves what it does in two main ways. One is that R1 chip. It has a secondary chip. The R1 chip is impressive, but it's not as magic as some people seem to think it is. People seem to think that the R1 chip is this magic ingredient that just fixes everything about Vision Pro's pass-through. That's not really the case. The biggest reason the R1 chip exists is the sheer memory bandwidth of how many sensors Vision Pro has, right? You have all of these, you have 2 cameras per eye for eye tracking. Then you have these 6.5 megapixel color cameras. Then you have like 6 different tracking cameras and a LiDAR and a true depth sensor. There's just so many sensor inputs in Vision Pro that the M2 chip literally does not have the bandwidth to take in all of those sensors. And that's one of the biggest reasons for R1. The other reason, of course, is that you can then take away the thermal management of that, of handling pass-through from the main chip. One thing that happens on Quest is when a developer is using pass-through in any way, so basically a mixed reality app, or even if it was a VR app that just shows a pass-through cutout, they have a lower CPU and GPU performance budget. The CPU and GPU on Quest 3 is slightly downclocked. And that's not because the CPU and GPU are being used for pass-through. Quest 3's XR2 Gen 2 chip has a dedicated section on it for pass-through to be handled, which is kind of what the R1 is doing, right? The idea that some people have that Quest 3 is doing this on the CPU and GPU is wrong. Quest 3's chip does have dedicated fixed function hardware for this, similar to the R1. The problem is that because it's on the same chip, the thermals that it's generating, both from taking all that sensory input in and from then doing that processing, means that to keep the thermals at a sensible level, you have to take down the GPU and CPU. So Vision Pro has, on a hardware level, more memory bandwidth for the higher resolution. It has a dedicated chip that means the thermals don't have to be affect the main system. If there's any hitches in the processing of the application itself, the pass-through processing can keep going. But the other thing it does is that it sacrifices depth correctness. And the thing about this is that you won't really notice this until you're in the near field. If you're sitting on a sofa in Vision Pro looking out to your living room and everything is quite far away, you're not really going to notice this trade-off. Where you will notice it is if you sit at a desk and you have objects very near to you. You've got your keyboard and desk right in front of you, your monitor maybe here, some other object, like a desk object here. As you pan your head around, as you rotate your head, you'll notice that the world skews in a slightly different perspective than it would if you had the headset off and you're turning your head. And if you do that same comparison on a Quest 3, you'll notice that while, yes, you do get some warping on moving objects from the Quest 3, you don't get that overall perspective skew that you get on the Vision Pro. So Apple has some hardware advantages, but they've also made a different set of trade-offs. Apple has decided that distortion shouldn't happen. but Meta has decided that depth correctness is the top priority. And it's very interesting to see these two different approaches. And as I said at the time of my review, the Metas is more promising in the sense that if they can just keep improving the depth estimation accuracy and resolution, they can solve their problems by default, right? The system itself doesn't need a fundamental re-architecture. With Apple's, I wonder what is their approach to improve that going forward.
Yeah, so wonderful outline there from David, and I think that starts to relate to what our fans like doing, what our audience likes doing, what we do internally, and then we try to kind of bring it together on the show in various ways. But what does that mean for future hardware? What does it mean for my next purchase 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line? Are there any significant differences that Apple gains by separating that architecture now and then putting it in even lighter weight systems more quickly than maybe Meta can? Is that the route we're on? I mean, Meta is moving as fast as they possibly can to not get outpaced by what Apple is doing at every corner. And the end goal here is a wearable computer on your face that can go anywhere you want to go. And I think the thing that I always think about, like the thing that's getting to me more and more, I had a conversation with my family last night, and he was looking at how do I pop out the lenses on a Ray-Ban glasses. He wants to get the glasses, but he wants to know what are my options for getting exchangeable lenses. Right, we're moving towards this place where smart glasses are a giant product category all on their own. Then we've got VR headsets, a giant product category all on their own. And both of these exist before we put the supercomputer in the glasses form factor to drive all-day IR experiences wherever we go. And it's a lot, right? Like, but we need two sets of prescription lenses. Many of us do. We need two sets of devices that hand off calls from one device to another. And right now we are describing the two first movers in this space, right, David? Like, you are so good at pointing out that Meta now has the exact first person view broadcasting feature that Apple Vision Pro has. So you can do the same thing, one from smart glasses that have completely pass-through optics, and one from completely opaque VR headset showing you the room around you. And it's the same exact functionality. You can see Apple and Meta going towards the same place at the same time from two different directions. And we're this close to seeing like what that means in a hardware sense. We're going to see that probably in a year, and we'll see the next steps next week from Apple software-wise is what we expect. We think it's going to be a little bit longer before we see new hardware headset-wise from Apple. Is right?
Yeah, it looks like Apple's going to be in a much longer cadence here. It looks like their next focus is going to be making a cheaper model. One thing, I think you brought up a comment, someone asking about will it really be a Vision Air if it's still heavier than most headsets? We expect that Vision Air will be a lot lighter than Vision Pro. Vision Air is obviously a name that you're using, commenter. It could be called Apple Vision. It could be called anything. We don't know what that non-pro headset is going to be called. We'll just move on from this topic after one comment I want to point out, because I think it's a good point that they make, is that Apple has actually made life a lot harder for themselves. Serious Goo in the comments points out Apple Vision Pro's mounted camera is in a very different location. And this is something we also brought up in our review, and something to point out, that because they have that eyesight front display, they've had to put their color cameras much further away from where your eyes are vertically. So they're making that challenge for themselves even harder. And so Apple, I would say they have a harder time, but this is something that they've done to themselves in wanting to have that front display. But let's move on to our next topic here. Not something that we need to talk about for a very long time, I don't think, but it is something we want to note because as you cover today, Ian, I think we got this article out just before the show. Netflix is now going to work in the browser on Quest.
Yeah, pretty big deal. It opens up the path to multitasking with Netflix floating inside other windows. And of course, this is part of a much larger transition for Meta. They haven't renamed the operating system yet, as you've pointed out. It's still the Quest system software. It's never really had an official name. It's always been informally named for quite some time. We've had that discussion going back years. So then Meta is switching over to Horizon OS, and they've got all of these system apps that they need to kind of bring forward into whatever form they become on all these new systems. And one of those core apps would be the browser. So I spent too much time. It's one of the reasons we're late this morning getting into the studio, going into two headsets back to back and trying to gauge, okay, exactly what will the platforms allow in Netflix on this system? What will the platforms allow in Netflix on this system? And it's silly because these things are going to change very quickly as more partners are brought up. So on Meta now or in the near future, in the coming days, you'll be able to bring Netflix up in a browser window. Right now, if you do that in Netflix, you go log in, you get all the way in there, you click on your profile, you think, oh my goodness, I'm in, and then you hit play, and it says you need to have Silverlight installed to enjoy your Netflix experience. That's going to change, and it's part of those building blocks for Meta's next steps with Horizon OS. We would expect that to see on most Meta-based headsets, right?
Yeah, I mean, almost certainly any Horizon OS headset is going to have the browser, which is right now called the Quest browser, but I assume they'll just rename it to the Horizon browser by then. I'm not a huge person for names. I don't think they matter too much, but that is probably what they will rename it to. So right now, obviously, you can do Netflix on Quest through the app, but the app is VR only, so you're in a virtual environment. You can't do it in Passthrough like you could in the browser. The app is limited to 480p. We don't yet know what the resolution will be in the browser. That's something we should note. And the app doesn't have downloads, but nor does the browser version. Ideally, you would want to see Netflix bring like the Android TV version of their app to Quest. It is still so frustrating that Meta is so focused on the web and web apps, because web apps are great until you don't have an internet connection. And I know there will be some web people in the comments that are going to tell me, oh yeah, progressive web apps and they work offline, and then, but like, how often do they really work offline? You know, like just to finish this, the Microsoft Word progressive web app on Quest, you open it with no internet connection and it does not work at all. So while PWAs in theory work offline, in practice, it just doesn't work.
I almost put this screenshot in my article on Netflix, but it was a side note to the article. But if you go to the Oculus browser app on the MetaQuest store, or it's actually just called browser now, but you go to the browser app on the Quest store, it says rated E for everyone, I think. And then it says online or requires internet as like one of its genres or one of its warning labels for the entire content. It's the very first thing that you see right when you like first open the app page, and it says online, of course, and then of course in the corner it says does not require internet over in the app permissions system. And it's kind of silly that you're downloading a browser that says that in its permissions field, even though I think technically you could install the app and then turn off your Wi-Fi and then open it, and it would open on your system, but it requires the internet. And if you go down to the menu system a little bit lower, it says it's still developed by Oculus and published by Meta. And between all of these different, like this one single store page for one single app, you can see all like the trail of tears of all the crying and fighting that has happened internally at Meta to get this product out. It's a big deal that things like this and multiple desktop support are at the OS level, right? And we're starting to see that take shape with this.
Yeah, as you say, I think this browser was like originally called Caramel back in the day. It was Oculus Caramel, and then it was Oculus Browser, and then MetaQuest Browser. And as you say, it does seem to have been renamed to just Browser now. But yeah, I think a web browser is always going to require internet, but that is the problem here in that some. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, it's an obvious thing to
I
say.
like this idea. Well, think about that hypothetically, David, where you like open up a WebXR game and then turn off your Wi-Fi. Like, what does that look like in the future? Can I continue and go enjoy my game, or does it really fall apart when I turn off the Wi-Fi connection? That's going to be funny to see.
Yeah, it's going to depend
Let's
on
get
the
through this
developer.
soon.
Yeah, the last thing I was going to say on this is some people may say, why are we harping on about this? It's 2024. How often are you not going to have an internet connection? But the big reason that this does matter is what happens when you're going on a flight. Meta has been talking up travel mode recently. They've added travel mode. We talked about it last week. It's impressive that you can do it. And I used my Vision Pro on the flight back from New York, and I really loved it. I've said this many times. This is probably going to be a new VR download bingo saying for me, but I was in economy class and I had a better movie watching experience than anyone in first class. And I think with Quest, if they had like a Netflix app that had downloads, you could get really close there now. You have that ability to put on this headset. It's not, 4K OLED like Vision Pro, but you're still sitting there in a seat. And if you're on like an 8 or 10 hour flight, you have your own personal cinema screen. You put in your earbuds and instead of looking at this little tiny dim LCD on the front of the screen that has only the movies they want, you can watch your own content. That's something that Meta needs to be able to bring to Quest if they want it to serve this entertainment purpose. And that big lack of apps is going to continue to be their biggest problem, because it's also going to be what Google does well. So a lot of people have talked in a negative sense about what Google will be able to pull off here, but we expect that on this Samsung headset, you're going to be able to go to the Google Play Store, download the Netflix app, and download your Netflix stuff. And that's going to be something that Meta can't match. Maybe that was part of the LG deal. That seemed to be something that they were looking into with LG, giving you like a virtual LG TV that has a Netflix app there, but we don't know what the status of that partnership is now. And we talked about that in recent weeks as well.
I want to say thank you to Spatial Bigs for becoming a member during this show. I want to encourage people to become members either here on YouTube or better off directly support us over on UploadVR.com. Thank you so much for your work and support here. We always have to remember our members over on YouTube that they've been here for a long time supporting us. We've, of course, been covering this and obsessed with virtual reality for more than a decade now in various fashions. And we're just now getting to the point where these things are selling in the millions. And many of the people in our audience and our members have been on this journey with us. So it's a delight to see the member pool grow, our patrons and our members over on our website. It's an enormous time to kind of like double down on your interest in this medium, right? I think that's what we're seeing from a lot of people. So thank you, Spatial Bigs. And I saw Spatial's question or comment. You can see the processing on AVP by looking at complex high-frequency detail-like image of trees. It melts them together a bit. This is what I've been thinking about related to this is the idea that Apple Silicon can control image processing all the way from iPhone all the way down to projection into your eyes. And so there's actually going to be a look to the stuff that comes out of Apple products. And I think we're going to start noticing that look. Classic film had a look, early low resolution digital Sony videos. Like go try to watch 28 Days Later and see if you really enjoy the look of that movie today. We're seeing a look to everything that Apple does, and it's interesting to see that comment. We're going to start noticing it more as time goes on, that the image processing from each of these systems is going to have a different look to it. All right, let's move on, David.
That's a very good point. You also see that on smartphone cameras. Samsung cameras have a certain look. iPhone cameras, Pixel cameras, they all do have a look based on how they tune the cameras. 2 comments I'm just going to read out before we move on because I think they make good points. Serious Goo points out that free Starlink on flights is going to be prevalent soon. That's a great point. I would only argue with soon. It's probably going to be a 2, 4, 5 years kind of thing before most airlines have the Starlink, but that is going to be a massive game changer, and it's going to be one of the biggest changes to the experience of flying long distance and even potentially short distance in a longer time frame in a very long time. So that this will only be a problem for a certain time. Eventually, you will get that high speed satellite internet on aircraft, but it still is a problem now, and they still could deliver real value today. And the last one is Subcog pointing out that they sideloaded the Netflix tablet app onto Quest, and they could download and watch movies on a flight. That's a very good point. You can sideload the traditional Android Netflix app and do that, but of course, doing that involves in activating developer mode in your headset, sideloading stuff. These are friction points that most users won't go through, but it still is possible.
And to that note, that functionality should or could exist out of the box on an Apple Vision Pro if someone at Netflix didn't click the opt-out button. That's what we understand. That's how we understand the App Store to function. So someone at Netflix would have had to opt out from those mobile apps, doing that out of the box on Apple Vision Pro. And the question is, did they have a business agreement with some other company to click that button? Or is it simply they're just waiting for the right time to support the feature across all of the platforms they support? And that's the type of thing we're always wondering.
Or are they holding it as a bargaining chip for their long-standing war with Apple over the in-app purchase rules on iPhone that makes it that they have to either not tell the user how to subscribe? They have to say, you need to be subscribed to Netflix to use this, but not tell them, because the only way to tell them in Apple's rules is to use Apple's subscription service and then give Apple, a certain percentage. This could be something Netflix is trying to hold in their cards when they're going to negotiations for that.
And we have to mention Big Screen before we move on, right? Like, Big Screen is out there as this little startup building its own headset now, out there trying to push it through its own vision. And we have to always bring them up as like an elephant in the room, as a little company affected by the very same thing that we're discussing right now. Like, if you're doing any of this as bargaining chips, well, I mean, what fairness are you giving to Big Screen if they're not allowed to play on the same rules that the big guys are playing by? But we don't know. Like, that's still a gray area and something we're investigating. Let's move on, David.
Yeah, let's talk about this news, because this is a really, really strange one. So HTC is giving every Vive XR lead owner who wants it 4 free accessories. And these accessories focus on upgrading the ergonomics of the Vive XR Elite. And it's something I really, this is a puzzling one of doing it for free. It's almost like HTC is admitting we did the ergonomics for this headset wrong. And, one of my biggest regrets is that I never made the time to review this thing, because I do have one. And it's just, at the time I got it, it was an incredibly busy period for us. And it got to the point where it made so little sense over time. There was no one ever asked for it. I never had a single person. I've had people before ask, are you going to review this piece of hardware? I get people all the time asking me, are you going to review this? There was never any push for people. We never saw a huge amount of our viewers using a Vive XR Elite. If you're in the comments right now and you use a Vive XR Elite, please tell me. But, in general, I was disappointed by it.
If David had a nickel for every person that asked you for a Vive XR Elite, you would have 0 nickels?
I would have 0 nickels. 0.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But yes, so the focus here is on upgrading the ergonomics, and to me it does seem like an admission that they did the ergonomics wrong, because the thing about the Vive XR Elite is they tried to pitch it as like being so small and light that it didn't need a top strap and it could have this really flimsy facial interface. I'll try and see if I can bring up a picture of it without these additions, and that just wasn't the case, right? Even though it is lighter than other competitors like Quest Pro and Quest 3 and Pico 4, it's still too heavy to not have a top strap. So in the box, they do have this really flimsy side-to-side top strap. I'll show you an image here of the Vive XR Elite being worn without any of this. But sorry, in this image, you actually can see the flimsy little side-to-side head strap. You can also see that the facial interface is really kind of minimalist and not able to hold the weight of the headset well, and this made it uncomfortable. One of the things I expected before I actually got a Vive XR Elite is I thought, oh, this thing's small, it's really compact, it's clearly going to be a lot more comfortable, but it just wasn't. It felt like kind of rackety and too much pressure on my face, and that does seem to be what they're trying to address here. So there's these 4 different accessories they have. There's the Face Gasket 2.0, which is basically this much thicker and heavier facial interface that can properly support the headset's weight. There is the Deluxe strap, which is this edition, a proper front to back top strap, like you see on Valve Index, Quest 3, Quest 2, Pico 4, all of the standard headsets. You have this top strap that supports the weight. And also they have a alternative facial interface, which is this MR gasket. And that's what you see in the top left there. And so that makes it work like a Quest Pro, where you have the open periphery and the pressure goes on your forehead. So 4 pretty significant accessories. The fourth being just these little clips that are supposed to help the battery secure better. They're not really significant, but that are going out for free, and that means new owners get it as well. It's almost like they're doing like a slight revision of the headset without actually calling it a 2.0, because none of the electronic components are being upgraded here. But with the VR headset, as we've pointed out many times, the ergonomic components, the facial interface, the head strap, all of this matter almost just as much as the electronics. So this is kind of like a XR Elite 1.1 by upgrade.
All right. I appreciated the comment from James saying that you should still cover interesting XR stuff with the broader population requests. That we do that all the time, and that is ultimately what edged, Vive XR Elite off of our schedule, right? Like, there's other things that we thought were more relevant to our audience that we spent our time on, and it's like it takes effort to say something is bad or why it's bad. Just as much as it takes to say why it's good. It takes a lot of effort to do both.
I want to point out that we do cover all of the Vive XR Elite software updates, all the major ones. We've covered things like that. It's not that we don't cover this thing. It's just a review is a huge time investment. And if we do that, the problem with this industry is that it's so fast moving. There's so much happening from so many companies, and we have to make the most difficult part of our job is making that prioritization decision, right? Of what do you cover and what do you not? Because you have a limited amount of time. We are a tiny team working as hard as we can, having to choose what do we cover. And then by making that, the opportunity cost is we don't get to cover something else. So I could have, and back when XR Elite launched, do this review that takes this certain amount of weeks, but then some of these other interesting things, including, indie projects and big updates that people find important and things like, and summaries would then have to not happen. And that's a cost in itself.
And I guess I feel like just adding that we deal with virtual reality. We deal with imagined spaces as default. We deal with with AI on the rise, you can stand up a company more believably, more quickly than you ever could before, that does absolutely nothing, that produces literal vaporware. Like, it's the most prime example of what vaporware is, could be produced by a motivated person with a couple AI websites incredibly fast. And that's time consuming, it's labor intensive to sift out what's real, what's interesting, and it's constantly, I go back to what David said at the start of that. He felt bad, right? That's how we began this. He felt bad that he didn't give this the shake that we give all other hardware, and I might empathize with him, because that is ultimately what we feel bad about all the time. Is we want to cover things and we just run out of time. Left and right. And that's, like, if you're pitching us news, pitch us again after a reasonable amount of time. If we don't respond, we always appreciate seeing new developments with work that people are doing in VR. It's incredibly hard to capture video of something interesting you're doing in VR and then send that over the internet and explain it to somebody else, right? And that message might not get across to us the first, second, or third time, but maybe the fourth time it clicks and we go cover your thing because it just made that much sense. So thank you so much. Let's move on, David.
Yeah, just going to read a few comments of people's own view of Vive XR Elite. Shalalaska said it was outdated on release. That's very true. This thing's using the old XR2 Gen 1 from the Quest 2. Not Suspicious said that they think the foldable frames of the Vive XR Elite was a great idea that needs further exploration. I agree with you. The best thing about this headset is the modular design, right? So you can either use this Vision Pro style with an external battery that runs a wire up to the headset, and then you don't have anything in the back of your head, so you can lie back, or you put the battery in the rear and use it like a typical Quest-like headset. That's the best part of the XR Elite. And I hope other headsets do things like that as well. But yeah, let's move on to talk about Spacetop G1. Spacetop G1, it's a screenless laptop, and you'll see exactly what I mean by that when the image loads here. So instead of a screen, you have a slot where X-Rail AR glasses slot in, and they are cabled to the device. And then you also do have a webcam where you normally would. So this is a very interesting device. And obviously, the use case for this is that instead of being hunched over, a single 14-inch screen, you can be in a more natural pose and more natural posture and have as many screens as you want. And so this thing runs a custom OS that is essentially like a Chromebook where you can have as many web browsers as you want. This isn't for everyone. It's a $2,000 device. It's shipping later this year. But it's a very interesting idea, and you can see that this is hinting at a big change to personal computing and a change to what we've seen happen over the past few years, a trend where this technology, as the resolution gets higher and as the comfort gets better, can turn screens into software in the same way that the iPhone and other smartphones turn many hardware devices in your home, from your alarm clock to, for many people, their flashlight, to their MP3 player, to their GPS navigator. All of these hardware devices got turned into apps, into software. The potential for mixed reality headsets and AR glasses is to turn screens themselves into software. And I think eventually we're going to see laptops that, instead of having the AR glasses, assume that you already own them and just have this bottom section, right? Think of just a MacBook, but without the screen. And then you can do all of the compute on here and not have to worry about putting all those thermals in your face, and then use the device on your head to project those screens to as many as you want.
Yeah, a really interesting in-between product in this period between platforms as we move from VR becoming dominant in its own way, right? I think it was funny a couple of weeks back for David and I to start adopting this language of a golden age of gaming approaching for VR, right? Like it really feels like that to both of us. It feels like that across the team, that just we're seeing things realized in VR in all sorts of ways, and we all know that these platforms bet that at the end of this journey, there's glasses you take out with you all day long, and what we wonder about is, like, what does the in-between period look like, David? Are we always going to be doing wireless connections between the headset we wear and a portable computing device we keep in our pocket? Or is there value in wiring the glasses on our head to the laptop right in front of us? Is it the same trade-off that we had when we were, oh my gosh, did you ever have a laptop that you tried hooking 3 Oculus sensors up to? Was that a thing you ever experienced?
No, I normally went for using it with a PC. I never really believed in the whole laptop VR thing because of the thermals and the fact that you had to have it plugged in anyway to get the max performance. When it comes to this question of cable, though, with this product, the main reason for this is because these things don't have a battery in them, right? These X-Rail glasses, part of the way that they get their weight down to be comfortable enough to not have any kind of top strap, to just essentially be like a really, really thick pair of glasses, is that they offload the battery entirely. They even offload compute, right? These things are not computers. These are just, media glasses essentially with the display, except this version has cameras in it, so it can do 6-DoF tracking. When it comes to, is that the optimal way to do these screens? As we discussed before, the great thing about Vision Pro is that its Mac Virtual Display feature uses a Wi-Fi direct connection that doesn't have to go through your home network. I think as long as there's a direct connection from the device to the headset, and you're doing this over a meter, 2 meters at most, that should be possible in this day and age to still have a really high quality experience without needing a physical cable.
Spatial Big saying, we're looking at a move toward democratization of the tech so unique ideas will get more room to exist. I tend to, like, the democratization term tends to be overused for a long time. Like, I remember Red Camera talking about democratization. I think they use that idea to think about what Red cameras could do. And, like, it's arguably true, right? You put a bunch of digital cameras in people's hands and they could do things with those cameras at resolutions, with workflows that you could not do with film. You couldn't go out and afford a film camera and all the development you have to do associated with that. So, like, suddenly there's a bunch of filmmakers because a new piece of hardware enabled you. But it doesn't usually follow that things are opened up that much just because of a new computing platform. But I think I think this is one of the exceptions. I think VR and the rise of it that we're seeing this year and flowing into next year is everyone everywhere realizing the promise of an infinite display, right? It's been there's been headlines, there's been books, there's been device after device promising, what if we could have uh three 60-inch displays around us at all time? Well, what if you don't even limit it in the 60-inch displays? What if you have Mario running over here as big as you want? You have Sonic running over here. You have your work over here. You have 30 windows running around you all at once. And the ones that are relevant to you are the ones that are nearest to you. Like that's the new paradigm we're moving into. And it is democratization feels like the right term for it, at least right now.
Yeah, I think democratization in the sense of you will soon, not yet, but soon be able to buy a headset that can give you a triple or five or six monitor setup for much, much less than a physical five or six monitor setup. But for me, the more important aspect here is the portabilization of it. If we want to keep using ization, it's the fact that instead of your triple or five or six monitor setup being this one specific location in your home, it becomes anywhere you want. One of my favorite parts of Vision Pro, one of my favorite things about Vision Pro is that I can have that same setup when I'm lying in bed or when I'm on a sofa or when I'm in a hotel room or when I'm on an aircraft. All I need to bring is a Bluetooth keyboard with me, and I have this quote unquote spatial computing setup of as many monitors at whatever size, wherever I want. It's not being limited to those physical screens anymore. And I think it's the portable aspect and the cost aspect that matters. Unless you have anything else, do you want to move to talk about Immersed now?
Yeah, we're moving towards some of our biggest subjects near the end of the show. So I do want to keep sort of making that call to share the link out across your social networks, get new people into VR that might be on the fence trying to figure out what's going on. We've gotten used to the people in our comments going, "What the hell is this? Why are there me's talking?" Yeah, and our commenters are used to it as well. So we want to get those people in here so they understand that, you know, this is it looks like cartoons now, but we're on a path that ends with all of our communications being handled this way. So thank you for everyone who's tuning in so far. We're pushing the 200 mark, and we're moving into the last half of our show. What do we got next, David?
Unfortunately, we're actually not quite at the halfway mark yet, but we're going to keep going. That's why I'm trying
if I say it, it'll be true. If I say it, it'll be true.
If you keep moving, it'll be true. Let's keep going. So this is going to be a controversial one. It always is. There's some people with incredibly strong views on this one, and that's Immersed Visor. So some people are excited for this visor. If you don't know what it is, it's a upcoming claim to be 4K per eye micro OLED lightweight headset designed around exactly what we were just talking about, this productivity use case, except instead of through AR glasses where the field of view is, tiny, like 40 or 50 degrees at the absolute most, this is through a pass-through style headset with a pass-through style headset that has 90 or so degrees field of view. And so some people are convinced that this is a scam. There are people that if you even mention this headset, they will get angry and tell you, "Why are you even talking about this? It's not real. It's made up. It's a scam." And some people are excited for it. So the news here is kind of directly related to who is right in that. And that's that in September, Immersed is saying that they are going to be showing people Visor at an event in Texas. They're calling it Immersed IRL. It's going to happen in September, and they're going to put on influencers and some journalists and interested pre-order people. They're going to put the headset on their head and let them try it out. And then they claim that shortly after, the Founders Edition headsets will ship. And then in March 2025, just past that, the rest of them will start shipping. So we will see in September if they put it on people's heads and it's real, it's not as total scam. The one thing I'd also say, and the reason I don't think this is a scam, is that according to Immersed, they will not take your money until your device ships. So that makes it dramatically different than a Kickstarter campaign. A Kickstarter campaign can eventually can essentially be a scam because they get your money regardless of whether they ship the product, right? If you've never backed anything on Kickstarter, that might sound remarkable to you, but that is true. Kickstarter, you pay the money, even if this is a $3,000 product, and they have no right to actually give it to you because you're pledging, you're not actually pre-ordering. This is not a Kickstarter. Immersed claims that you will not be charged until your headset ships, and if they're lying about that, that would put them in serious legal trouble.
Yeah, and they've of course got a very real software product, right? The software product is in use. It is on multiple headsets. It does what it's described to do. So I believe this thing. These are real partnerships. This could be a real prototype that they have behind closed doors. And I guess if I was to do the devil's advocate or try to stand in or understand why they would be closed about giving demos, it's probably not ready is the most obvious solution, right? Or like the most obvious answer. Now the question is whether it will ever get ready. Like that's the problem. We understand, we empathize with our people who wonder about whether it will be ready, because that's what we've wondered. If you go back, I think we've got a really good track record on this show and with our audience discussing how important it is that these companies deliver on the timelines that they say that they're going to deliver on, and just missing a timeline by 3 months could make you be behind another company's product. And we don't know whether Immersed can get there. And one of the problems here that I have, David, is Immersed software. Kyle, if you're watching, this one's for you, right? The technology that Immersed does has been tried and done before by 10 other startups. It's over the last decade, bringing your Windows into VR has been attempted multiple times. Geek Odin, Virtual Desktop's founder, is a constant watcher of this show. We appreciate his when he tunes in and watches us, but that is a cornerstone app that does fundamentally the same types of things that Immersed does,
but only for one monitor.
Only for one monitor. Yeah. So think about that. Like there are, like I'm suggesting here, 10 plus different attempts to do the same thing over the years.
There haven't been that many apps that have done since Immersed done 5 monitors, right? In terms of spawning completely original monitors and virtual monitors. Sorry, they actually have. I'm just saying they have been doing something quite unique, right? And when you talk about their software product, that's been something that people are really using. There are people out there who swear by this, who use it on their Quest, who use it on their Pico, who use it on their Vive XR Elite. I do think they pulled off something well with their software. I don't even think that people who are detractors about their hardware will say that their software isn't any good.
No, sure. I think what I'm trying to get across here is that the software is a platform problem, and it always has been. Bringing your Windows into VR, into the headsets, it's the same thing that Meta and Google and Apple are trying to manage. They are trying to manage your Windows for you. And I have watched startups born, grow, and die and hand their money back to investors because they got cut off years ago by Windows Mixed Reality's last attempt to do some of the same things here. But to your point, David, yes, Immersed is well loved for doing the multi-monitor thing at such high performance for so many people on current systems. And that's a very big deal for a lot of people right now. The reason I'm getting in is people in our comments are like, they're just, Immersed doesn't pass their sniff test. And I think it doesn't pass their sniff test partially because of this brick wall that you all recognize is there at the platform level for the functionality that Immersed provides at a software level.
I think it's the brick wall in Immersed's communications about Visor and the way that they are kind of very secretive, and that they have been doing things like blocking anyone on Twitter who asks any, in hard questions. There are real reasons for people to be skeptical about this, but there is a reason, and the answer is that Immersed is a front, and Qualcomm is the company that's actually building Visor. Qualcomm is doing all of the engineering work for Visor. They are the ones that are doing the actual headset, and Qualcomm can't directly compete with Meta and other companies that are building headsets, because when your main supplier starts competing with you, that's when you start to really focus on trying to find another supplier or do it internally. And, for example, Meta could start spinning up that internal chips product again and try to focus huge investments on trying to reduce their dependency on Qualcomm. But what Qualcomm can do is give a startup like Immersed all of the information that they need to essentially do it. It's like when an intelligence agency from a company trains up a guerrilla force in another company to fight their enemy. Are you really fighting the enemy? No, you're just training up a guerrilla force and giving them all the weapons to do it. That's Qualcomm is the large company in this, or the large country in this situation, and Immersed are the guerrilla fighters.
Wow. Quite an analogy there, and I'm thinking of the Spaces initiative there, and then of course the departure of Hugo. We don't know where Hugo, what was his last name, but there was the head of XR over at Qualcomm departed within the last few months, and that's a big departure to have leave a very big company at the core of this industry, as David is describing. Let's move on to the next one, because as I'm describing, our audience is still building, and the size of the subjects we're going to be discussing is getting bigger as we move through the show. We're still not, we're about at the halfway mark now, I think.
Yeah, we're just passing the halfway mark now. So let's talk about that Pico news. So a few months ago, we saw the fact that ByteDance, the owner of Pico, the owner of TikTok and Pico, ByteDance, had trademarked Pico 4S, strongly suggesting that the next headset from Pico will be called Pico 4S. And that comes a few months after the information reported that ByteDance had cancelled Pico 5 in favor of a new strategy. So Pico's old strategy was reportedly they were going to come out with a Pico 5 that focused on being a huge upgrade over the Pico 4 and bringing in, a bunch of technologies, and presumably, things like eye tracking and depth sensing and all of this stuff, and really pushing the boundaries on things like field of view. That was cancelled reportedly. And instead, they're going to do Pico 4S as a kind of more basic upgrade to Pico 4, while in the background, they work on Project Swan, reportedly. Project Swan being a long-term Vision Pro competitor. So a headset that's not expected to come out for several years, but will be really high-end. In the meantime, in a much more recent release, we should see Pico 4S. And one of the things we did know about Pico 4S is its controllers, because they have leaked out earlier this year, both in the Pico software and on Chinese social media. So Pico 4S controllers are going to take the same approach as Touch Plus and drop the rings. So you get these controllers that do not have the rings anymore for improved ergonomics. What we didn't know about Pico 4S was anything else until now. There is a benchmark, a Geekbench 6 benchmark from a new Pico headset, publicly showing that it has the same chipset as Quest 3, the Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2 chip. So that looks like Pico will be able to essentially take their offering from the last gen chip to the current gen chip. The other thing that we saw is that it was paired with more RAM. So Quest 3 has 8 gigabytes of unified memory, whereas the Pico headset in this leak, this benchmark, has 12 gigabytes. So it looks like they will actually be slightly stepping above Quest 3 when it comes to performance, especially in on-device multitasking, and developers may be able to do things like higher resolution textures, for example. But right now, like, the biggest problem with Pico 4 is that it's on the old gen chip, right? So it does have pancake lenses. It does have, dual displays. It does have IPD adjustment. It does even have color pass-through, but it's only with one camera. What really is missing in Pico 4 is that new chip, and that looks like this will be the big focus of Pico 4S.
Thank you to the commenters calling us out for our hard work here. It does help us to like, comment, subscribe, help the algorithm realize that we are trying to cut through a lot of hype here and get to the core of some big subjects. With Pico 4S in particular, I want to talk about the $200 price point. Meta has yet to be beaten on price. It's been a long time where they have at every corner pushed away the competition on price. There was the Summer of Rift. There was uh, with like this. There was a time when Meta was shipping 3 sensors, touch controllers, this amazing headset, and it was still packaged for just hundreds of dollars. It was an incredible value that they ended up cutting that entire package to, and then they followed it up with things like Gear VR being shipped for free. They followed it up with Oculus Go being $200. Um, and then we see the honing in on Quest from Quest 2 or Quest 1 to Quest 2. And then there is the comment here from Spatial Biggs. This chip is looking like an inflection point. Now, I want to call out historically Andrew Bosworth at Meta, the CTO there. He is on the record publicly suggesting, I believe he called Quest 2 the inflection point. I think he very early suggested that Quest 2 had crossed over into a threshold of product market fit, of an inflection point for virtual reality. And we're still, several years into what mass hallucination that he was not telling the truth, that like he was not telling the world that VR is actually at an inflection point. And here we are with Apple having a headset out in market in answer to a lot of what Meta is doing, and still the common perception is that VR died years ago and is a thing that is not useful. We're going to see that change very rapidly in a very in a very small amount of time here. And I think Spatial Biggs pointing out this chip in particular, if you can get hand controller based systems and you can add multiple controllers from different companies like gamepads and multiple track controllers, untracked controllers, lots of hand tracking games that are really, really good, and then you can ship just a headset in a box to a lot of people, that's going to change a lot of minds.
Yeah, I think Quest 2 was definitely the inflection point when it came to just a device having the capabilities and the price to go mainstream, right? $300 for a standalone headset with track controllers and everything the Quest 2 offered. But Quest 3 definitely does push past a quality threshold that makes people want to actually keep using the device and enjoy it in a way that no previous standalone really got to. I want to point out a comment from Hussein X here, who makes a great point saying that Quest 3S, which we'll talk about later in the show, is set to be inferior to Quest 3, whereas Pico 4S is set to be superior to Pico 4. This will confuse consumers. Yes, we'll talk about that more when we get to talk about Quest 3S.
Let's make sure we address that because, yeah, that is a fascinating question to think about. And it points to opportunities down the line for both companies right after this generation. But yeah, let's get on to there, David.
Yeah, we'll just quickly talk about I guess the last thing I want to say on this Pico news is that their pricing will be fascinating because it sounds like they're going to have something that is essentially equivalent to the Quest 3, but it may be possible that they are able to undercut the Quest 3, and that would be very interesting. Of course, with the massive caveat of not in North America, because Pico is not selling headsets in North America, and also not with the same content as the Quest store. But it's still possible that Pico 4S comes along and undercuts the Quest 3 while having the same capabilities. So James O'Loughlin is asking a question that we will also be answering in just a few topics. Is 3S a confirmed name or is there evidence for that name? Yes, there is, and we'll be talking about that later in the show. But we will move on now to talk about the Horizon Workrooms update. We'll briefly talk about this because it's significant, but we're not going into too much detail. And so essentially this app, Workrooms, that has two modes. It's kind of two apps in one, and it's on Quest headsets. One is the personal office, and that is what we were talking about earlier, where you can click and open this app and you'll see your laptop or your PC screen pop up in front of you, a giant virtual version of it. And then you can also spawn extra side monitors. So even if you're on a Windows or Mac laptop that only has one screen, you load this up and you now have three screens, and it just works. You move your mouse along to the right side of the middle screen and it's on the left side of the right screen. It is as if you actually have a triple monitor setup, and yet you do not. This is entirely just that trend we keep talking about, turning screens into software. The other mode of Workrooms, which is what it's probably more widely known for, is its online meeting functionality, where you only can have a one screen in this. This cannot do what the solo personal office can do. You have one screen and you'll see it in front of you, but what you can do is meet up with other avatars using the same avatars we have here, and you can cast your screen up to a large version in the end. And so it's designed for meetings, right? In the same way you would have a Zoom meeting. You can all jump into this room, you can see each other around a desk, you have spatial audio with each other, and you can cast something up. But it just got a big update, and it's a really mixed bag. So they took away some of the biggest flagship features of the app, which is crazy when you think about it. Imagine in applications, flagship features get removed. One of those is the whiteboard. You had this whiteboard in meetings. You could stand up, and the Quest Pro controllers were actually built for it. They had these stylus tips on the bottom where you could write on the whiteboard. You could also do it with any touch controller. That is dead. It is gone. There's no more whiteboard. They also got rid of breakout rooms. So there used to be a room mode where you had these separate tables. So you could have, because the spatial audio has realistic distance fall off, you could have separate conversations while still being able to move around the room or shout over to each other, just like in real life. That's something that you can only do in VR. You cannot do that on traditional platforms. And so it's really disappointing to see that gone, but they've refocused the app. They've streamlined the interface. They've made it really much easier to join into a meeting. They let you now join with a link. The personal office is just better in every way. It loads so much faster. You can position the monitors better. Everything is better about the actual quality of the app, except that they've removed features.
That's not David. It's not David. I know it looks like David, but Spatial Big saying, why would they remove the ability to draw on a board for meetings? Think about some of the context we've suggested elsewhere in the show. That is a separate app over on Vision Pro. So on Apple's ecosystem, they have the, I can't even think of what the name of the app is right now. Freeform. So it's an app you go and download from the store on basically any Apple device, and then it's presented across from you. And then, as David has pointed out in multiple places on multiple formats, the headset in conversation with other people chooses whether to have you gathered in a group, chooses whether to have you in a presentation style where you're all looking at that board together. And that's ultimately what we're seeing happen to Meta Horizon Workrooms. I think I would be very surprised not to see the whiteboard return in a different form.
I think it could return in future. I think for now, what they're just doing is streamlining, right? They're making a basic software development decision of let's try to do less, but do those less things better. And that means that, if you have a bunch of different features in the app, then every single time you do a major update that tries to improve fundamental things, you have to also improve each of those features and link those in. From a general software development perspective, an app with fewer features that's simpler means that you can actually improve the velocity of improving the general overall quality and the kind of fundamentals better. But James O'Loughlin asked a question, a rhetorical question, I guess. The Touch Pro stylus nibs are now useless. Yes. There may have been one or two App Lab apps that used them, but this was by far the flagship app. And if you needed any evidence that Quest Pro is dead and never really lived, then that's it. That Meta is actually fully willing to kill a flagship feature that they literally designed the hardware controllers of Quest Pro for in one of their apps.
Yeah, so Spatial Big saying it makes sense, and they also believe in XR meetings. The persona experience is very well done, and I have to agree. The funny thing there is, of course, we are going to see Meta learn from everything that's happened in personas, and I think that's what we're observing and what we're talking about a little bit here. I think we should move on here because this is going to develop over time, and we'll have new features here to talk about probably in the near future. Yeah, let's move on, David.
Yeah, let's move on to talk about a surprising piece of news that we don't really have any details on yet, but it is an announcement, and that is the partnership between Magic Leap and Google. So I say we don't have details, but they did.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
They did actually kind of say in the announcement what each party is meant to bring to the table. So Magic Leap is bringing their expertise in AR optics, and Google is bringing its platform technologies. So, kind of reading between the lines and not really, there being many lines here, it sounds like Magic Leap may, at some point later this decade, want to launch a consumer version of its AR headset. And to do that, you need a whole software platform, right? Right now, their biggest focus has been on enterprise. They have been entirely focused on enterprise for years now. And if you want to go and compete in the consumer market, you need the kind of platform and ecosystem that only the likes of Apple and Google have. And so that's where this partnership seems to make sense.
Yeah, so we have, what is it, 3 subjects lined up for after this, and we expect each of the final 3 subjects to be big discussions with a lot of angles to get into with our audience. So do want to encourage everyone once again to share out this link, get those people in here. We're going to be talking about Palmer Luckey, Quest 3S, and then Sony. Long time coming, big news there. But when we talk about Google and Magic Leap, I want to talk about the Pico question. Can we talk about the Pico question and the operating system? I think that's an interesting thing to discuss. I want to give context on Magic Leap and Google. David made sure to include it in his article, but Google was a very early investor in Magic Leap, and they had a whole story with a CEO that had very big expectations for how many of these devices they would sell, how many they could sell, and fell way, way short of those expectations. This company is now majority owned by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, or its independent wealth fund, is the way it's referred to in public relations documentations. But it's sovereign wealth fund is what I think it's called. But it's essentially owned majority part by Saudi Arabia, and there's a good chance that Google is also a major shareholder. So what you end up having there is, I hate to say it this way, but you have 2 losers of the 2 early losers of this XR space teaming up to do what? Right? Like, they do both have incredible expertise in the things that we've discussed. That Magic Leap has incredible expertise in optics, in AR optics. Google has world knowledge that is unmatched in anywhere, right? And they can help serve each other in significant ways. But Google folded on Daydream super fast, and there's probably on order of thousands of Magic Leap units in the world after billions of investment in that effort. And some of that money flowing from Google, some of that money flowing from Saudi Arabia, and there's not a whole lot to show for it on the consumer front.
Yeah, I mean, they did have to pivot to enterprise. There is no way to do a consumer.
Something changed with your microphone.
Sure. Let's see if the commenters can hear it. I won't speak too much until we can see. I'm wearing the same headset. I haven't done anything with the microphone, but maybe there's something wrong with it. Yeah, commenters, please let me know if there's anything changed on my microphone. I can swap headsets. Spatial Big saying I sound fine, so maybe
it's just to me then. Okay, all right, let's keep going.
Yeah, so I think that the play here is AR glasses, right? So with Samsung, Google has a partner for releasing a mixed reality headset, something on the lines of Quest 3 or Apple Vision Pro. But with Magic Leap, they have the potential to go for the holy grail here. We know, or we think, that Meta is going to show off true transparent AR glasses later this year. We talk all the time on this show about how they are so far off, but we're starting to get into the middle of the decade now. We're going to get to the point where it is going to be possible in a few years to launch expensive and limited, but very real standalone AR glasses. And we've seen reported that Google kind of gutted its own internal team years ago and gave up on it in typical Google style, and had to cancel its own project. But Magic Leap has been pushing away that whole time, not on consumer market, but in the enterprise market. They have this headset that, as I say many times in this show, is the best in class for transparent AR. It has a field of view that goes beyond any other transparent system, even though it's not the same level as opaque systems. It's a very, very impressive for a transparent system. And if you were a company that wanted to launch AR glasses, Magic Leap would be the ideal partner. And we've actually seen reported that Magic Leap and Meta were in talks last year about the potential of licensing some of Magic Leap's AR technology to Meta. It looks like, unless Magic Leap's partnership with Google is non-exclusive, it looks like that's fallen through, and Google's been the one to pull in. And I'll bring up this classic field of view chart that we love to bring up in the show to show you that, yes, a Meta Quest 3 is going to bring you a lot wider field of view than any of these transparent systems, but this X-Real Air 2 Ultra field of view signifier here can be substituted for pretty much everyone else. Pretty much every single transparent AR system has this white field of view here, and Magic Leap 2 is completely unique in having this much, much taller field of view. And so their innovation is not going to have stopped here. And I think if anyone is going to pull off wide field of view transparent optics in the near term, in a mass market producible sense, not in a prototype that can be shown off at a trade show, it's going to be Magic Leap. So I do think the potential here with Magic Leap and Google is more promising than people who only remember Magic Leap for what it did 6 years ago may believe.
Yeah, I appreciate that, David. A lot of really useful, fair context. And in response to James' comment that Magic Leap 1 is incredibly influential product, hardware, software, and design, just bad timing and market fit, I think that's very true. I think that can hold up to examination, that comment about what Magic Leap did. The issue with all startups is, right, if you hold on to your money or if you stay small, you can make it for longer. And what we saw was dozens, if not hundreds of people laid off of Magic Leap over the years because of those choices, because of that mismatch between market fit and timing. And that's really rough. Like, it's as I have to respect the idea that I went to a Magic Leap conference and I saw their executives stand on stage and talk for 2 hours or 3 hours at an audience of hundreds of people. And some of those ideas were interesting during that conference that Magic Leap held. And then I went and tried on a headset that showed a reasonable field of view in AR. And to your point, right, like, they've done a lot to keep at it, right? They know that there's companies like Ultraleap as well as Magic Leap that recognize their technologies are going to be absolutely fundamental to long-term personal computing. And I am absolutely certain that these companies have regularly declined various offers for acquisition, for partnership, for investment. They're looking for the exact right partnership, the exact right path to the biggest possible pool of money. And it wasn't Magic Leap 1, it wasn't Magic Leap 2, and we got to wonder whether Google and Magic Leap are going to get there in the next year.
Yeah, this will be a really interesting one to watch. So unless there's anything more, I think we can move on to some of those final topics. I think we were going to talk about the Palmer Luckey announcement of an announcement, but I think given the time constraint now, let's just briefly mention it, and then we'll talk about it when he actually makes the announcement later this month, because we'll probably end up doing a lot of duplication if we don't do that. And so if anyone missed the news, Palmer Luckey has announced that he will announce a headset. And so this will happen at AWE, which takes place in mid-June, later this month. He hasn't said anything more. There has been no detail. He hasn't said if it's consumer or enterprise or anything, or if it's AR or VR. Just he's working on a new head-mounted display, and he will announce it later this month.
Yeah, so obviously, based on our previous reporting, he had a contentious sort of exit from his company that he started, Oculus, and then got investors on board or co-founders on board, and then sold very rapidly to Facebook, and then put us all on this path towards a decade-long VR takeover of personal computing. So he was, of course, started a what is that? I heard a window sound. Of course, started the defense company, as well as the Mod Retro chromatic handheld that we just had announced. The thing that we whatever he says in VR is going to have a lot of people perk up their ears and listen because of what he did already in this market. So just him sort of announcing an announcement is something that is going to interest people because they want to see what his sort of take is on the VR market in any shape.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is I'm greatly looking forward to seeing what it is. I'm really anticipating it, but without any details, there's not anything we can really say here. We don't have anything to go off. All you can say is that in recent years he has praised Apple's approach with Vision Pro, saying that it's the right approach for them in this current market condition and time in the industry's history to target the high end. He's criticized Meta for abandoning the high end too early. Luckey's view is quite similar to ours in that we both believe, UploadVR and Luckey, that this is the early days of this industry. We are still in the early days of VR and AR, and he believes that Meta should be focusing more on enthusiasts in the same way that technologies have developed over history, where at the start you get only extreme enthusiasts, and then over time you get a wider and wider market gradually. And Luckey seems to believe that Meta has tried to push too fast to get VR into mainstream. And one of his comments here was that in Meta's market approach, there's too much Starbucks and not enough Mountain Dew. So it's a very interesting set of comments from Luckey that suggests to me that if he is doing anything, it will be if he is doing anything consumer, it will be more focused towards the higher end, more niche, more enthusiast market. But we'll just have to find out.
We'll have to see. I'd be curious really what tracking system on whatever system that emerges there. But yeah, let's move on because we are going to cover it again as soon as we hear more. But let's move on to our last two major subjects here. And one last request out there to share this link out because we're going to move into Quest 3S being listed, as well as something that has been years in development. I get a moment in here where I get to look at David and talk to him about something I've been waiting to talk to him about for a very long time. So I'm excited for that, and you get to see it here live as I figure out how professional I'm going to be when we get to that subject, David. All right, David, let's talk about Quest 3S.
Yeah, so James O'Loughlin, you were asking about this one earlier. This is finally the time for that. So Quest 3S was listed on the official Quest store. We saw multiple apps on the Quest store list in their headset-supported Meta Quest 3S alongside Quest 3, Quest 2, Quest Pro. So this essentially confirms the multiple rumors we've seen in the past that the headset that Meta will next ship will be called Quest 3S. And so it also, interestingly, may confirm an earlier leak that we did not report on. So there in March, there was a leak of a Meta user study, an apparent Meta user study where they go out to users and they ask them in advance what they think of the marketing and the positioning and the general market strategy of their upcoming headsets. And so my similar moment to what Ian is talking about is that as a team, we could not decide whether we thought this was legitimate. I argued on the side that I did think it was legitimate. Ian adamantly said, no, this is definitely fake. And so we didn't report on it. But it looks now like it may, in fact, have been the case that this was real. And so we saw in these French presentation slides given to this guy who has now deleted the post and is probably in legal trouble if he had any sort of NDA or anything like that signed. This Meta Quest 3S headset, and what you can see by the specs here is that it uses the same single LCD panel as Quest 2. It's thicker than Quest 3, so likely uses the same Fresnel lenses. And in the other shots and this one, you can see that it has these two sets of 3 sensors on the front, as well as the side cameras in the same exact position as Quest 3. And so this is not the first time we've seen information about Meta launching a cheaper alternative to Quest 3. This is something that we've been talking about on this show in general for months now, because all of this started back in March 2023 when a Meta internal roadmap leaked to The Verge, and that mentioned that Meta was going to launch a headset after Quest 3 that was cheaper and was able to bring more people into the market. And the reason that Meta needs to do this is because right now, people are still buying Quest 2 instead of Quest 3 because Quest 2 is cheaper. Price matters. It really, really matters. And Quest 3 delivers some really impressive components with its pancake lenses and dual displays, but those aren't strictly necessary to deliver the experience. If this headset this headset, based on the reports we've seen in the past from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, from the Wall Street Journal, and from a Chinese analyst who's been reliable in the past, should have the same Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2 chipset that's in Quest 3. Based on this image from those leaked slides, it looks like it will have color pass-through cameras. Essentially, what this headset will be is the same feature set as Quest 3, but with lower quality components. So you'll be able to have the same Quest 3 exclusives on Quest 3S, the same VR graphics that are greatly improved over Quest 2, and even room-aware color pass-through mixed reality. But you're going to see that through Fresnel lenses and on a lower resolution LCD screen.
So a couple of things I want to think about. I want to mention one thing on the last subject when we were talking about Luckey's new headset. One thing we have yet to see is something that's based on computer vision, but it separates the computer vision from the headset. So you had, I guess you had the Oculus Constellation sensors doing that with the pattern on
PlayStation
the
VR.
Sure, they're identifying the headset's location, they're identifying the controller's location. But what I would love to see is a Kinect style sensor actually mapping out my room. It doesn't have to be on the headset itself. It can be fed to the headset separately, and then I get a lighter device with fewer sensors on it. It's one thing I would like. I like to think about that conceptually because it starts making us think about what platforms are running these systems. There was a question going back earlier in the show asking whether whether there was any chance Horizon OS might run on Pico's hardware. And it's a fascinating question to think about because ultimately it would benefit Pico quite a bit in some respects to do that, wouldn't it?
In some respects, yes, it would give them access to a store with a lot more content. But in the main respect, it would be catastrophic because Pico, like Meta, does not make its money off the hardware. The Pico 4 is subsidized. It is actually a really impressive piece of hardware. The Pico 4 has pancake lenses, it has these dual displays, it even has motorized IPD adjustment, and it has controllers that, other than the rings, are really impressive. It has high quality haptics. It's a really nice piece of hardware. The field of view is great as well. The problem is that they're subsidizing it to get it to that price. And so if you no longer have the store layer where you're making that percentage cut off transactions, you are no longer making profit. So to do this, Pico would have to become horrendously unprofitable. And that's the reason that the Horizon OS strategy doesn't work in every way, because nobody can compete with this if they use Horizon OS, because Meta will almost certainly subsidize this headset. We expect this to come in at $300, just like Meta is ever so slightly subsidizing or even just selling at cost the Quest 3. Meta does not make their money off hardware, nor does Pico. This is like games consoles, where when games consoles launch, they're doing the exact same thing. The money is made when you buy the content, not when you buy the hardware.
Yeah. So some very interesting discussion here, people going in different directions. The comment that the Quest 3S can probably be seen in the background of one of Boz's videos. So one of the things I want to talk about is leaking stuff. So we had debates. We've done some learning development, David and I, in how we talk about leaks, because there are so many levels of way information can be sifted out into public. And in this case, Meta Quest 3S appeared on an actual storefront, but it's actually really entertaining to think about the kind of chess moves that are being played here between these companies, right? These companies don't want to be beaten to market with anything. And the things that our audience is arguing about, whether the 3S is really a good name or not, we understand it, right? People don't want to go backwards in any core functionality. And like we're wondering whether it's the same amount of RAM. Like if you're talking about Pico using more RAM, wouldn't more RAM in a Quest 3S warrant the S name? Or would that only work with more cost at the bottom line?
Yeah, so the S here is not being used in the same way that Apple used to use it for iPhones, where you had like the iPhone, 6, and then the next year the 6S would come out and be better, more powerful. This is not being used like that. The S here is being used in the same way as Xbox Series S, where it's actually a lower price thing. So this is not going to have more RAM than the Quest 3. It's not going to have better hardware. It is focused on being a cheaper Quest 3. And I notice that there is this framing sometime you brought up where people talk about the idea of going backwards, like the idea of Quest 3S going backwards. But in fact, this product is not about going backwards from Quest 3. It's about going upwards from Quest 2. Because as I keep saying, the problem is that right now, people are buying Quest 2. And that means that those people that buy the Quest 2, they can't play the Quest 3 exclusives that are built around the Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2. So they're not going to be able to play the Batman game. It's not coming to Quest 2. They can't play any of the mixed reality content. We're seeing developers build room-aware mixed reality content like Starship Home that's going to launch later this year that relies on that color pass-through with room-aware scene mesh ability. That's not going to be on Quest 2. So they want a cheaper headset, but by buying a cheaper headset right now today, they miss out on all this content and they get the old generation processor, so they get the worst graphics, the inferior graphics. Quest 3S is about making it possible for more people to buy in and get those features while still accepting the trade-off of Fresnel lenses and low resolution. It's a cheaper alternative. It should. I agree with you. 3S isn't a good name, right? Or I agree with anyone that is saying that. I would personally call it 3E. I think that kind of sounds better, like 3 economy, 3 everyone, whatever you want to kind of say that's for. But at the end of the day, the name doesn't matter because the pricing will be what makes it make sense, right? If you see that the Quest 3S is 300 and the Quest 3 is 500, I think most people will be able to figure out where these products lie.
And the number scheme, like there would be an assumption that like because Pico has a higher number, they're going to be a newer system, and I think that's failing. I think that's what this user study might have ultimately been used for, and that's what when David and I were debating this, it's like, are the images faked? Is the name faked? Is the whole user study real? Is like they could have been studying any element of that image. I think we ended up even discussing this on the show because we didn't discuss it in an article because we were trying to assess what level of like what to take away from this. But I think what's ready. I want to move on to the last subject here pretty soon because this is going to be a major device. I'm wondering whether it closes the book on a Quest Pro. I think this leaves, if it really goes, if this is the name, I'm still going to give it if, right? You can take your win. We've run an article. He can take his win. I will believe it's called 3S when I see the product announced formally with their names attached to it. Because that's, like if I was playing chess with people, I would try to head fake my competition left and right. And that's the only reason I suspect, I question that. But like, when you Quest Pro 2, this problem with Quest Pro 2 surfacing, you have Quest 3 at this $500 midpoint, right in the middle of everything, where you can get a few accessories for it and go up to 600, 700, or you can get more storage. And now you're going to have this entry level the device that can probably start scraping at $200 without controllers during holiday sales.
No.
You don't think you'll see holiday sales in 2 years of a Quest 3S
in 2 years, sure, but not before then. Controllers are not as expensive as people think they are. This idea that the controllers take $100 off is fantasy. The controllers cost Meta something on the order of $30 or $40, right? That's not getting you to this. You could maybe take $50 off, right? But the problem is that you're then taking away so much of the Quest Store content that does that really even make sense? And are the people who want to buy a headset for hand tracking things like, sitting and watching movies, they're going to get the Quest 3 where it's slimmer and has better ergonomics and has the better, clearer lenses. If anything should be offered without controllers, it's Quest 3 for something like $450. I just want to maintain, I am almost certain that this thing is going to land at $300 plus or minus $30.
Sure, but like do I get to do a dance around you in 2025, if it starts shipping for $200 without controllers, right? Like, or 2026, I suppose,
Well, yeah, sure.
because
If
that's
it
the
happens
path.
2 years, that's different. 2 years later is different. I'm talking about
Right.
any time soon, right? Like that's
Yeah.
by that time we'll have a Quest 4.
Well, all right, so that's where I was going with the space here at the other end, right? You've got the low end here, whether it's controllers or not, and all the problems with doing that you're suggesting. And then we've got the Pico 4S hypothetically, which could try to go as low as we're talking, right? It could try to do the same thing, and Meta doesn't want to get beat there, right? But at the other end, right, you start talking about 800 to up to 1500. You talk about this place where I want a device that does everything a Quest 3 does. It's as fast, it's as comfortable, it has the best lenses, the best screens, and maybe you throw in a little bit more. I don't think that's a Quest Pro anymore. I think they tried that out. I don't see like does it make sense for them to
I,
go against Apple head on in the business realm again?
I think for the foreseeable future, that's the point of the Horizon OS headsets, right? I expect that the other companies making these headsets, Asus, Lenovo, they'll be priced somewhere between 800 and 1500. That's the area they'll take. And eventually we'll see Meta jump in at the true high end to show off something like, codec avatars with eye tracking and face tracking and really push that. But they aren't there yet. And they need, as we talk about many times, I don't want to start, repeating myself, but they need that micro OLED supply chain to be there for that to be ready. I think they wanted to with LG for 2025, right? But we've seen those reports that are quite credible based on LG's response that that's been pushed out to 2027. But the general overall point here that matters more is it's just not Meta's focus. Meta's focus in this industry is about making it bigger. They want to get to hundreds of millions and eventually a billion people. They don't care what 100,000 enthusiasts want. They want to know, what headset do I need to ship to get the next 10 million, the next 10 million, and then up to 100 million. And right now, this is that headset, because this thing is going to sell like hotcakes, I think. I think if you look at what this is, right, you're getting the problem with Quest 2 in many ways was that the graphics sucked for VR. So this is going to get you past the threshold that we believe that Quest 3 has gotten, where developers can now ship games where the graphics are not, they're not amazing, right? But they're good enough that it's no longer like very distracting, and you can create an immersive AAA style experience where it's not the biggest problem anymore. And mixed reality, where all of this kind of pass-through stuff of just being able to sit there and use the headset on a plane, eventually with media apps that actually support downloading, all of that can be brought onto this exact same headset. And so, same feature set, lower quality, $300. This thing should sell like hotcakes.
Yep. It's like I like that. Just sell like hotcakes. And I think what we're discussing is like, how could they even turn up the knob even more? How could they even push more out the next year? And we're getting there. Like it's the sky is the limit here for this system that's coming together. The options that you're going to have to pick things. It's going to be phenomenal. Like you can't even imagine uh having all of these different systems running the Gen 2 XR2, and then you just have an entire array of choices, all the way from OLED immersion down to the cheapest model imaginable. Like it's going to be amazing when it all comes together.
Yeah, James O'Loughlin making a very funny comment. $50 Quest, fully ad supported and made of cardboard and sugarcane. Yeah, that comes back to a point that Palmer Luckey also made. We're talking about Luckey in the last topic, where
Drink.
he released this blog post a while ago when Oculus Go came out saying free isn't cheap enough. And he made this really convincing argument that even if current VR headsets were free, that wouldn't actually gain mass adoption because the quality there still isn't good enough. It's both.
It's
The only thing I would say against Luckey is price does matter more than I think Luckey does acknowledge in that blog post. It does matter. We see that right now with Quest 2 is outselling Quest 3. But quality matters too. And it needs to be, it's so obvious to say almost, but you need this fusion. You need a device that provides a very high quality experience at a price people can actually afford. And the only thing that's going to deliver that is just time. Later in the decade, in the 2030s, we're eventually going to get to this headset that is at a really, really good price and offers like an experience better than even like the Vision Pro and Quest 3 do today by far. and that's when you get mass adoption. You have to get something that is both, as hard as that is to achieve.
I think we're ready to move on to our last subject here in a second, unless there's any comments you want to respond to. I think I want to mention that WWDC, so Apple's big event, is coming up very, very soon, and that is where we expect Apple to kind of show off its next phases across the entire board. So when they announced Vision Pro last summer, they took a long time to actually go and ship that thing. It's actually, because of that long distance between announcing the thing and shipping it, I think there's some warping in people's heads of just how much that thing should have sold in that amount of time. Like, you're not going to go buy it at $3,500. It's off your radar for years. So I just want to throw it out there that Apple does have a few times in its history where they have surprised people by lowering price. And if they brought that additional manufacturing online quicker than everyone expected, there's a chance. David has been pointing out that it's probably future hardware that's going to benefit from those costs. But I think what I always wonder about, and it's going to be my point that I'm going to stick in the sand as we move into this last subject.
Yeah.
If you don't move fast enough, you're dead in this space. If you wait too long to do what you need to do, whether it's cost, content, if you're behind Meta in any way, shape, or form at this point, you need to go and dig a hole for yourself and lie in it, just like Daydream did. There's no catching them. And so
I think Apple is the one exception. I think Apple can afford to wait.
So that's where David. So why is that the transition to the last subject? David, explain it to me.
Why is that the transition to the last subject? Well, the last subject is PlayStation VR2. So they have it on $100 off sale for the next 2 weeks. The next 10 days or so. So if you want one, now would be the time for $450 instead of $550. But the far bigger news is that they have officially announced the PC adapter. So back in February, we talked about the fact that Sony said that they would let PSVR2 owners access additional games on PC. That was their exact quote. They did not say how that would happen. We saw some leaks. A Korean regulator in the past few weeks certified this thing, so we knew it was going to happen, but we now have it officially announced. So it's going to be $60 and it's shipping on August 7th. And so on one end, you have the connector for the headset single USB-C cable. On the other end, you have 3 ports. So one of them is a fixed USB cable that goes into your PC, typically your motherboard or in the front if you really wanted. That's not a good idea. You also have a port that seems to be for power, so you have to connect it to a socket. And then the third one is a display port. So you will need your own display port cable, but this will allow you to plug it into your PC. Now, there's a major caveat here, which is that PlayStation VR2's standout features are not supported on PC. Eye tracking does not work on PC. High dynamic range does not work on PC. Controller precision haptics does not work on PC. You only get standard vibration. Headset rumble does not work on PC. What will work on PC via Sony's driver for Steam VR, because that is how this is working. It's a driver Sony's making for Steam VR with a associated companion app, is Passthrough. You will be able to use the grayscale Passthrough, and that's what you will use to set up your boundary. You'll set up your safety boundary the same way you do on a PlayStation 5. But yeah, so that means you get an OLED headset on PC. It works on PC, but with none of its standout features.
So, David, would you be able to go pull the last hardware survey screenshot up for us, the Steam VR hardware survey? Because I think that's where I'm going to go with my commentary here, why I transitioned us in this way to this subject. Right, we are at a transitional time on the Steam VR hardware survey where I believe it is Quest 2, Valve Index, and Quest 3. 1, 2, 3 on this survey.
So this is from the month before. We didn't report on the new one because it doesn't have anything significant, but it's pretty much the same, right? There have been no massive shifts in the past month.
So you can see the Sony PlayStation VR, the original headset that Sony shipped, this little dinky thing with a processor box that looks hysterically like the processor box that you just showed up on the screen for this original headset, right? unofficial support, hacked together by communities, and this thing is still sitting there above in use, a couple of these lower end headsets all these years later. What does a PSVR 2 adapter with OLED modern displays, semi-modern displays, do to this chart and the things at the very top of this chart? So we see MetaQuest 3 right there at the edge of about to overtake the Valve Index HMD for the #2 spot in use on Steam. Now, hysterically, anytime we always go into this chart, we always talk about who's the winner here. The winner is Valve. At the end of the day, the winner, every one of these headsets sells content on Steam to players out there, and it's all Valve's game. All right, it's all money feeding into Valve, but it matters to Valve which companies are at the top of this list. If they don't have a couple options, if when they launched years ago, right, OpenVR to OpenXR, they were able to bring in the Rift. They were able to bring in Windows Mixed Reality. They obviously had their own solution. Then you went a generation later and you had the Index as its own solution in competition to all these devices that could port in and get all of that content out of Steam VR for all of these other devices. It was fantastic, right? The winner of all of this is Steam. But how does Steam keep Meta from having, 70% of all users on Steam?
Well, I think as you just said, it doesn't matter. To Valve, if 100% of Steam VR users were using Quest headsets, it doesn't matter because, as you say, they're still buying their games from Steam. As we keep harping on about in this show, the money that's made in all of this is on the platform level. It's on the transactions. It's not the hardware, with the exception of some companies, one of them being Apple. Apple's the really huge exception, and they always have been in the tech industry. Apple is the company that makes their profit off the actual hardware. It's why they're priced so high. For the people that always talk about, why is Apple a ripoff? Why are they priced so high? That's the answer. But let's talk about who wins here and what the advantage is for Valve and for Sony. So for Valve, you're absolutely right. The huge advantage is that they're going to get a new wave of users. And I'll talk in a little bit later about where I think this is going to go in terms of the headset's quality. But let's say it goes somewhere around here, right? It's a new influx of Steam VR users that have got either already they had a PlayStation VR 2 for their PS5, and then they add this now to their gaming PC, or they even got one for the purpose of using it on Steam VR. The advantage to Sony here is not software. The advantage is that they get to sell out their PlayStation VR stock that they have been sitting there not able to sell. The reason that this is happening, no, I mean, it's true, right? The reason this is happening is that PlayStation VR 2 has failed. The reason is that we've seen that report from Bloomberg that Sony had to pause production because they simply cannot sell the damn thing. This is a last ditch cut. They're saying, we have a bunch of these things. What's the cheapest way that we can sell these out? Firstly, you do a seal, right? The $450, $100 off seal. That's the first step. The second step is you release a $60 adapter that gives this product a relevance to an entirely new market, PC gamers, and you hope to hell that they buy it. That's the advantage of Sony here. They're not getting anything on the platform level. In fact, that's probably also why this is so half-assed, right? This isn't some giant venture to bring like a PlayStation VR platform to PC and, with eye tracking and HDR and all this. This is just an adapter that splits USB-C to DisplayPort, USB, and power. And it's the minimum effort they could have done here. It's hopefully going to help them shift some PlayStation VR units. But in many ways, this news from an industry perspective is a bad thing, even though from a customer perspective, for someone who has this headset or wants it, it's a very good thing.
Yeah, so I was shaking my head and nodding my head as David was going along there in equal measure, because I think what David's done is describe what this is now. He's described what Sony could get together and publish in a reasonable time frame against Meta's onslaught, right? I think what we're learning and what we're doing with our audience and what we're learning internally is we're seeing the bad timing. We're seeing these companies get their timing wrong. And I think that's a transition. That's why I brought all of this up. What I've been harping on, the reason I threw my arms into the air is it seemed like Sony had its timing wrong years ago. It seemed like something was off with their pacing in getting there. And I don't think you're exactly right about software not being the pitch. If they had an operating system, a user-generated operating system built around the things you made in dreams on PC, it would be pretty darn compelling. It would be better than Horizon, I think, in some respects. Am I wrong on that?
In some respects, yes. In other respects, no, right? It's not, that's one app like that is not going to be a saving grace. If Dreams was that good, it would be that good even on PlayStation. Instead, we're seeing like a Dreams, as far as I'm aware, like it got either only a minimal PS5 patch or not a one at all. This is something where Sony has scaled down their ambitions for Dreams. If that were the case, in fact, Dreams would have gotten PlayStation VR2 support. It got PSVR 1 support. It didn't even get PSVR 2 support. I don't think there is like a magic rabbit in the hat here for Sony. I think they just released a headset at too high a price. They didn't fund enough content. They aren't taking this as seriously as an investment as Meta is. And we've now got to the point where PlayStation VR2 has just, we don't have confidence that this is something that Sony is actively investing in. And to me, this is just like a quick get out.
Well, so I appreciate David's context there. He might be right. I'm going to give them one last chance. I'm going to pull out hope. This is something I've seen coming a mile away. I've argued that it was coming, and you've helped me put shape to the way it would appear when it finally came. But the question is, are they cost cutting all their way out, or is there one last chance? And you described, I think of PlayStation Home, right? They did PlayStation Home a long time ago on 2 generations old system, and it was this interconnected network of spaces you could go in and play around in. And they abandoned that. They walked away from it, and now they have nothing, and it's in shambles. And you're describing like them moving on, and I believe there is a big space for a PlayStation Home in a lot of homes. Like I would love to put on a headset and feel immersed in the world of PlayStation as like as silly fanboy-ish as that sounds. I have loved the Astrobot games and going and collecting all of these classic consoles that have followed me through all these years. And they've done incredible things with VR design as well. That's a lot of stuff that can live on PC. And then when you add Steam as a second option in addition to all of that stuff, that's a pretty cool package.
Right, but they're not even releasing Astrobot for PlayStation VR 2, right? You're talking about like Sony going to the next level, and they don't even want to go one step up. You know, like this, they have not invested in PSVR 2. On the anniversary, we saw no new AAA or first party titles. On the latest State of Play, we just saw gameplay trailers for 2 games that are third party that are coming out on other headsets too. Like this is, I don't want this to be that. I'm not saying any of this because I want it to be. I really, really go back to see what I spoke about when this headset came out. I really wanted it to work. It just didn't. And I think the biggest issue, as I've said before, is the price. Selling an accessory for more than the console is insane. It's completely insane. From a psychological perspective, a console buyer does not want to buy something that costs more than the console to plug into it.
But David, it's not more expensive than a PC. They made a PC VR headset for the wrong system.
Sure,
now they're correcting that.
Sure, but the opportunity for them, that's not something that they care about, right? Making a PC VR headset, that's not going to make them a lot of money, right? Because even though this thing probably is priced with a profit, it's probably a very small profit, right? They are not interested in selling a maybe $50 or $100 margin profit to a couple of 100,000 people, right? That's not what they're interested in doing. They want something that's a much larger platform. They want something where they're getting the recurring revenue. Again, even when it comes to PlayStation VR 2, I keep harping on about this. This is not what makes them the money. It's when you go and buy Horizon Call of the Mountain. It's when you go and buy Resident Evil Village. It's when you go and buy Gran Turismo. And when they make a PC VR headset, like they're now making this, they don't get that money. Valve gets that money. When you go and buy Half-Life Alyx, Valve gets 100% of the money. When you go and buy the Gallery, Valve gets 30% of the money. So Sony gets 0.
Mechanically speaking, I don't think they could launch this thing on PC with the features PlayStation VR owners need to play the games that they want to play. You described Gran Turismo. I need Gran Turismo on a PC with a racing wheel auto loaded in front of me. If I've got a racing wheel in front of me, I want PlayStation's computer vision, Sony's computer vision system to look at that racing wheel and say, "Hey, do you want to add that to Gran Turismo?" And I click yes or whatever. I put my controllers down, and boom, I'm driving a Gran Turismo. I'm driving around those courses with a real racing wheel on a PC using this headset. They can't launch all those features that it's launching without.
They could do all of that on PlayStation 5, and they didn't. They don't want to. Like, why do you think they're going to do more on PC than they do on PS5 when they're doing less on PC than they're doing on PS5? Because they don't have the
Because I am
incentive.
hoping for them. I'm hoping. I'm
I
dreaming,
can hear
David.
the hope, and I have the hope too. But we have to be realistic here about what Sony is doing here, and it's just there is no evidence that there is some magical massive investment that Sony is going to make in novel VR software anytime soon. It's just not what's happening here. This is as I keep saying, a loss cutting mechanism, and I don't want to be saying this. I really, really don't. But look at Astrobot, right? Even the biggest PlayStation VR2 fans have gotten the message now when Astrobot gets announced as a non-VR title.
I don't buy it, David. I don't buy that Sony. So Epic Games, Unreal Engine, right? Like, if we go and play a video, I'll try to talk about it in our game show, but I just went and did What If. It's one of the first Unreal Engine 5 experiences, and visually it's phenomenal. It's a stellar experience. And one of the things that we have been harping on again and again, week in, week out, is Flat to VR Studios. These magical things that, because somebody built it, rebuilt a game from the 1990s in Unreal Engine, suddenly there's just built-in VR support if they just flip a mod in there. That's phenomenal amounts of content that just needs, like, the same way that X Input became a universal system for you to get your gamepads into VR. It doesn't matter what gamepad you bring, you have a good chance of it controlling that game on your PC. We're moving towards that sort of thing happening on PC, and Valve is certainly ready for it. Like, they're building towards it. But Epic, they went and did the Epic Game Store. They sued the hell out of two of the biggest platforms in the world in order to try to open up their own slice and share into providing the biggest market. I think there's an argument to be made that Valve won VR.
Well, that's just, of course, Valve didn't win. Valve won PC VR, but they obviously didn't win standalone VR because they're not in standalone VR. You can't win if you don't compete.
And all right, so I appreciate it. You fell for my trap, David. I think standalone VR is potentially a misstep on the path towards all-day AR. I think Meta sees everything that they've done in VR as them trying to get an operating system or entitlements, the bones of what they need for an AR system that runs with a fraction of the compute of a Quest system.
I mean, I think you should listen to what Michael Abrash told you when you spoke to him, where he told you that these are not, AR glasses are not the successor. These are two separate product lines. Why on earth would Meta get to this point where they're eventually going to be selling these incredibly compelling mixed reality headsets, right? If you look at the development from Quest 1 to 2 to 3, just extrapolate that out 5 to 10 years, and you have this thing that can basically be this spatial computer and gaming machine and entertainment system. So you think you're going to get the AR glasses and just chuck it out the window? Just, no, I don't want to make Quests anymore. Why bother? It's like Samsung doesn't stop selling TVs because they made phones, right? Like they can sell two different product lines at once.
Every VR headset made since 2016 gets better when you add Steam to it.
Sure, it does, except the problem is most people don't own a gaming PC. This is the age-old debate in this industry that some people just don't get. It doesn't matter how good PC VR is if the person doesn't own a gaming PC, because you open Steam Link and guess what you're going to see? No PC found, because there's no PC there. So Yes, PC VR is amazing. Yes, it is. But for the majority of people, they don't own one and they don't want one. And that's literally the entire reason that the Quest line has been so successful. That's what made Quest 1 the biggest breakthrough in VR. That's what made Quest 2 the first mainstream VR headset, precisely because you didn't need a PC. And that doesn't mean to take away from the fact that, sure, adding a PC to it makes it even better. But that's a dual mode thing, right? It's like, yeah, sure. That just makes the value of standalone even better, because that means that when your PC's uh, broken or you're traveling or someone else is using your PC, you can still load up Beat Saber. You're not dependent on the compute. It's an addition, not a
But
replacement.
yeah, I appreciate that. And to give context on what David's saying, like he's bringing up my own reporting against me and defeating my point of speaking face to face with Michael Abrash, where he points out that when you're at home, you'll have access to local hardware that will make your experience better. You have access to Wi-Fi and PCs and storage
No, it's not.
potentially.
I think you've misunderstood him. It's the fact that a headset is physically larger than glasses, so you can have more compute on it, right? You have these when you're out with your glasses, these things have to be 70 grams,
I
dissipate
know.
500 milliwatts, and be socially acceptable. So then you come home and you put down your glasses onto the charging dock. And we're talking about your life in the 2030s. You put your glasses down on your charging dock at your front door. You walk into your office where there's a keyboard and no monitors, and you put on your headset. And that's when you get this thing that has, a powerful
We will have
chipset
both. I
and
agree we'll have
precise
both.
mixed reality. So this is going to be the Quest line, and this is going to be the glasses line. And this is why, you know, Meta and didn't lose VR. It's like the Quest line is this. This is what the Quest line becomes.
So
Probably eventually used more for mixed reality than VR, sure, but still also VR that will be, used by hundreds of millions of people.
the thing I want to push back on, the reason I made that claim, which I'm not going to stand behind, I'm going to back off of my claim that they won VR. I wanted to throw it out there as an idea just to ponder, because the responses I saw in the comments, and David, you went in a different route, but tens of millions of headsets, right? Tens of millions of headsets is how many Quest 1s and 2s we know that they put in the market, and we expect even bigger market share when we go to Quest 3. And Meta is saying that each generation further along this line, people are using them for longer and doing more things with them. That's all great news for the VR developers out there. It's all great news for the market, like catching on. The What I have to remember is so many, like there's people who've never, like when they go to a PC, they realize what they were missing. It's like it's a story as old as every VR headset that's out there, right? Oh my gosh, it's eye-opening to go into Flight Simulator, Half-Life Alyx, and you are one of like you are the world's expert on all of the things keeping people from going and getting that PC. But why there's so much tension and back and forth between you on this, David, is don't you see the way Valve is making it easier to own a PC? Don't you think that's going to play out in the next few years?
It's slightly easier, but not dramatically so. And it's still to the point where, like, it's not ease of use that stops many people, right? It's cost is one of the things, right? The idea that 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it was completely true to say that PC gaming was a similar cost to consoles. But now, if you want to get a PC that can actually drive the kind of games you just mentioned, like Flight Simulator, if you want a PC that can actually run Microsoft Flight Simulator at a frame rate that will not make you sick in VR and a resolution in VR that will not look like just a blurry mess, you're spending thousands of dollars. So from a cost perspective, that's a huge issue. There's also portability. You're talking about a thing that has to sit in the corner of your room, that is not something that a student can just pick up and bring between their dorm and their home. It's not someone that travels can bring around a lot. I am a PC gamer, to be clear. I'm a massive PC gamer. I love PC VR in particular. I am the kind of person that loves to play Flight Simulator and Elite Dangerous and DCS. I'm not taking away from that. I'm just saying there's no point in being delusional about what the actual market size potential is of this. PC is a place that is unashamedly for enthusiasts. It is growing over time, and that's great to see, but it will never be at the same level of convenience as a headset that you can just pick up anywhere and put on and not have to think about external compute.
Into it, we've gotten David correcting me, even though I have been proven right that we would get the PSVR 2 on PC.
Sure, but for the wrong reasons.
All right. I'll accept it. Thank you so much for the amazing conversation. Are there any comments you want to talk about before we move on? We've got a big couple weeks coming up.
Yeah, I think just I want to bring up Kevin Brooks' comment saying that they had a 10850K, a 3090, and it wasn't good enough for Microsoft Flight Simulator. They had to get a 13900K and a 4090. So yeah, I think people don't talk about this enough, right? That like to PC VR for any simulators or high-end games like this require an absolutely ridiculously powerful PC, right? It's completely correct to say that if you're talking about non-VR gaming, you can go and build yourself a PC for like, less than $1,000. Maybe even if you're really budgety, you can get down to $500 if you're buying used parts or whatever and have a great experience. But for PC VR, it's thousands of dollars. Like you're talking about building a PC that costs $2,000 to $3,000 to really get something that isn't going to disappoint you.
I built my first PC for the DK2. I owned other machines before that, and it was an accomplishment. It was an enormous accomplishment, and I know that you've felt that feeling of accomplishment. A lot of people in our audience have felt that accomplishment. When you see a device, when you put these pieces together with your own hands, there's a moment of delight that is absolutely special. And I know, Valve put a frunk. They literally called it the frunk on this last generation HMD because they wanted people to screw around with the eye space right in front of you. They wanted to see what people could put in there and maybe use it as a display, which is exactly what Apple Vision Pro did. These people know what it's like to own a PC. They know what their audience wants, and I can't wait to see what surprises they have in store. I think they're going to surprise you, David, but we'll save that argument for 2025, maybe.
I truly, truly hope they do. But yes, thanks everyone for the conversation today. It's been really, really great. We've got a lot of viewers here. We've got so many comments we can almost not keep up, but I promise you we are reading them. We are following along. We're trying to incorporate as much of what you're saying into the conversation as possible. And please obviously do leave comments below after the show if there's anything you didn't think of at the time.
Thank you so much. Leave comments on our UploadVR.com articles. Please do consider becoming a member or patron and supporting our work directly. It makes a huge difference with us able to bring more people on board, hopefully eventually get more people covering more interesting things. And we've got WWDC coming up soon, and then AWE out in Long Beach, California after that. And then a big long summer where a bunch of executives are going to take their time off. And then the PSVR 2 adapter arriving per PC. And then September to November is going to be enormous. So thank you for being on this journey. We'll see you soon.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you.